Are you hungry? The woman's voice cut through the noise of traffic and the endless shuffle of strangers. The boy lifted his head slowly, his lips cracked, his eyes glazed with exhaustion. For a second, he didn't believe she was talking to him. People never did. But she was. She was kneeling right in front of him, her shadow falling over his trembling hands that clutched an empty cup. The city roared around them, car horns, footsteps, laughter, but for that brief moment, everything seemed to pause. When was the last time you ate? She asked again. He swallowed hard. 3 days, he whispered. My name's Ethan. Her name was Grace Turner. She didn't have much herself, barely enough, in fact. 2 jobs, a rented apartment that smelled faintly of mildew, and a heart that had learned to survive more heartbreak than most could bear. But Grace had never learned how to look away from suffering. She saw herself in that boy, small, forgotten, fighting to exist in a world that walked faster around pain. She took his hand, cold and shaking, and said softly, "Come on, let's get you something warm." That moment changed everything. Bringing Ethan home wasn't part of any plan. Her daughter, Lily, was skeptical. "Mom, we can't afford this," she whispered one night while Ethan slept on their worn-out couch. Grace only replied, "We can't afford not to." And that was that. The days that followed were a test of endurance. Grace stretched her paycheck thinner than ever. More oatmeal, less meat, fewer lights at night. But the apartment filled with something it hadn't felt in a long time. Purpose. Ethan, once silent and guarded, began to thaw under the rhythm of ordinary love. He devoured the used books Grace brought home, whispering the words aloud as if afraid they'd disappear. At school, he stumbled at first, struggling to catch up. But he worked harder than anyone else, staying late, asking questions, writing notes in the margins of every page. Teachers noticed. Grace noticed too. The way his eyes lit up when he learned something new. The way hope replaced the emptiness she'd seen that first day. Years slipped by. Ethan became part of the Turner family in every way that mattered. He helped Grace carry groceries, fixed the leaky faucet she'd been ignoring for years, and made Lily laugh again. When he won a scholarship to a top university, the whole neighborhood gathered in disbelief. The boy who once begged for coins on a city street was heading to college. On the morning he left, Grace hugged him so tightly he could barely breathe. "Promise me one thing," she said, tears glistening in her tired eyes. "Don't forget where you came from, but never let it define where you're going." Ethan nodded, his voice breaking. "I won't, Mom." He walked away carrying not just a duffel bag, but every act of kindness that had built his new life. Grace watched until he disappeared into the crowd, her heart full, her hands empty. But for once, that emptiness felt like peace. Because sometimes, saving someone else is the only way to save yourself. But Ethan carried Grace's belief in him like armor. In every sleepless night, every setback, every rejection email, her words echoed in his head. "Don't quit on yourself." He threw himself into technology and business with a hunger that frightened some and inspired others. He studied until sunrise, coding in dimly lit labs, sketching ideas on napkins, building devices from scraps. Many of them failed, spectacularly. Investors laughed, friends drifted away, and some nights he couldn't afford dinner. But each time despair crept in, Ethan remembered the woman who had once offered him a warm meal and a second chance. And that memory pushed him forward. By his late 20s, the boy who had once begged for food had become the man building a company the world couldn't ignore. His startup fused innovation with compassion, sustainable technology meant to make real lives better, not just richer. When no one believed in him, Grace did, and somehow that belief had woven itself into every blueprint, every mission statement, every goal. Within a few years, his name began appearing in headlines. Ethan Turner, visionary entrepreneur. His TED Talks drew millions of views. His company, Halo Tech, became a billion-dollar force for change. But through all the success, one thought never left him. She saved me when the world looked away. Years later, a convoy of sleek black cars rolled down a familiar downtown street, where time seemed to have frozen. The same cracked sidewalks, the same coffee shop Grace used to pass on her way to work. Cameras clicked as the cars stopped beside a weathered apartment complex. When Ethan stepped out, tall, poised, in a gray tailored suit, people whispered his name in disbelief. The billionaire who had changed modern technology was standing in front of a building that looked ready to collapse. But he wasn't there for a photo op. He was there for her. Grace opened her door, confused by the noise outside. Her hair, once chestnut brown, was now streaked with silver. Her hands bore the marks of years of hard work. When she saw the young man walking toward her, she smiled politely, not recognizing him at first. Then he dropped to one knee. The moment his voice cracked, whispering, "Hi, Mom," everything fell into place. Grace gasped, covering her mouth as tears filled her eyes. The cameras, the crowd, the city, all faded away. Ethan took her hand and pressed it to his forehead. "You gave me everything when I had nothing," he said. "You saw me when no one else did. Everything I've built, it's all because of you." The street went silent. Even the security guards stepped back, some wiping at their eyes. For years, Grace had lived quietly, never expecting anything in return for her kindness. But now the world saw what one small act of love had created. From that day on, Grace Turner's life changed. Ethan bought her a house on the edge of a quiet lake, filled it with light, books, and laughter. He made sure she never had to worry again. But more than that, he created the Turner Foundation, a network of shelters and education centers for homeless children. Its mission was simple: to give kids the same chance Grace had given him. News outlets ran the story for weeks. Headlines read, "From street corner to Silicon Valley, the boy saved by kindness." When reporters asked Ethan what fueled his empire, he never mentioned algorithms or strategy. He always smiled softly and said, "A woman named Grace Turner once gave me dinner when I hadn't eaten in days." That single act of kindness changed everything. Years later, when Grace sat in her garden watching the sunset, she often thought about that day on the street, the day she chose to stop. She'd never imagined that one decision, one warm meal, one open door could ripple across decades. But it had. And somewhere in a crowded city, another hungry child lifted his head, unaware that a story like his had already rewritten what kindness could do. If this story touched your heart, please like, share, and subscribe to Kindness Corner. Because sometimes, changing one life can change the world, and it always begins with someone who decides not to look away.